Hi, this is Jeff Nyquist, and in this post-election broadcast of Friends and Enemies, it is today, the day of the broadcast is November 9th, 2024. And of course, Trump won the election last Tuesday, and he won it cleanly. It was interesting to see the ripple effect of this. You had Xi Jinping calling Trump the next morning, congratulating him, wanting to repair relations, as if their close friend Biden had somehow damaged Chinese American relations. Very odd. Suddenly, Russia was into peace, and Iran even was begging America to heal their relations. What is the origin of this? And then other ramifications. The German government collapse, and maybe we'll hear more of this from my co-host, Alex Benesch. So, Alex, tell us about the collapse of the German government. What are the dirty details?
What a wild day it was. I mean, it felt like it was totally on edge, and then we saw the stories coming in. The White House is secure, Senate, things were looking good for the House, and of course, the situation with the Supreme Court. So, didn't really. I didn't want to. I didn't want to gaze into a crystal ball, and I was just waiting for the results to come in. And literally the same day, our German government, social democrat, leftist government collapsed that very same day. So we're gonna have new elections soon, pretty much around the time when Trump gets sworn in, roundabout, or when the handover of the new U.S. government will take place. So it's interesting, fancy timing. And also, with the next election, we can expect over here to see the conservatives win, the very old conservative party here win, which has always been pro-America, pro-Anglo. It's been started by the Americans actually after the war, and the current leader, Mr. Merz, always been close to the Americans. So it seems like finally the pieces are coming together. I mean, it looked like for a moment there that Europe was completely lost and completely abandoned. I mean, it's still going to be an uphill battle. We're facing this behemoth of Russia and China and North Korea, and they're just increasing their activity. So it's still going to be a really uphill battle, but for the first time in what seemed like ages, we had a very, very significant day, a very significant change. And obviously, even the Germans, even the Europeans were not really buying that much anymore into that strategy the Democrats had chosen, namely to paint Trump as the devil, make everything about him. It just they over tightened that screw, right? There was this twisting and twisting and twisting that one screw, and then the whole thing broke for them, right? So even people over here realized it's about the policies, it's about the party. The world's not going to end with Trump. It's just that this change really needed to happen. So even over here, the strategy of the Democrats really didn't work. That was some day. That was really some day, and also, I mean, we always. I mean, right now, people have to think about the next steps already, because we could tell what the winning strategy for the GOP was. Of course, they had to pretty much tell somewhat different things to different voter groups. Now that was analyzed, as it's always done, and so that strategy. It brought with it a certain amount of risk, obviously. Now, we saw that some of the more radical people, they were required to vote GOP. It would have been, too dangerous to alienate people with this idea or that idea or one idea or the other. So there were some radical statements during the election cycle, during the campaign, obviously. But that was more like a strategy, right? And also, what we saw in the last months and even before that were some pro-Russian statements, coming from various politicians. Now, that was also partially a strategy to tell these voters what they wanted to hear. Thank God it worked out in the end. Thank God this strategy worked out. It tipped the scale. But there's an inherent danger in that strategy. Obviously, I think everybody can understand that if you kind of have to talk to these different groups in that way. And I think the Democrats will now look very closely at that strategy that the GOP has used. So then the Democrats will try to find these fissures, to find these fault lines, try to increase the stress of these fault lines to make this strategy of the GOP, make it more unstable so that it doesn't work maybe the next time. So I think this is why especially this show is so important, because now we have to be at least 2 steps ahead of the Democrats in that game, and also steps ahead of the Russians and the Chinese. I mean, are we really going to see Alex Jones as a press secretary? Are we really going to see Kennedy Jr.?
No, I know. Well, I think they have a good idea of having JFK Jr. looking into toxins in our food.
Yeah.
I think that's long overdue. I think there is a problem. I mean, there are certain things on the left that certain people on the left talk about that are valid. There's a lot that people say that aren't. I don't, his idea about the military-industrial complex, yes, I think there is corruption in the Pentagon. It needs to be cleaned up, but he's kind of against, he takes it to the point of being against the development of American military power, which I think is dangerous. But he's very idealistic man in this respect of knowing that these big pharma companies and these food packaging companies have done some very dirty things. And I've known the stories from people whose families were in big pharma going back 40 years. There's been some dark things with pharmacology in this country with the big pharma.
And Kennedy has a track record with that. He's sued some of these companies for that stuff in the past.
Yes, he has, and he sued them successfully at times. Now, I'm not, biology is not my field, and I tried to bone up on it after the pandemic. And I learned some amazing things that I didn't realize, like the science behind viruses, how epistemologically problematic it is. I had no idea. There's scientific discoveries that contain mysteries which we have not even begun to touch or to fathom. So this whole thing about the pandemic, you had lots of people with all these different theories. Oh, it's just the flu. They're inventing it. It's not real. I had a Brazilian doctor friend who believed that. But I always was a believer in the hard data. And of course, there are mysteries involved in these things, trying to figure it out. But one thing was sure, there was a political agenda being engaged in connection with the virus. And that agenda was connected to China. It was connected to the CDC and the National Institutes of Health and Fauci's organization, to basically our biological warfare, you could say apparatus, which is also connected to the Pentagon and Fort Detrick and so on. And there's been I've followed this for many years. There's been a lot of false accusations by the communists, by people on the left, about us making bioweapons when the Russians and the Chinese are the ones making them. And of course, we do work with biological organisms defensively, which is allowed by the treaty. They try to convert this into we're building an offensive weapon. Now, what Fauci did appears to have gone outside the rules by going to the Wuhan lab and it's like he was helping them, really. I mean, if you want to translate it, people get it all wrong. Oh, America got the Chinese to build this weapon that America could use on the world. No. Excuse me, the Chinese middleman in here is not insignificant.
Yeah, I mean,
who's the agent of who?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Now, and especially when it's about, as you said, it's about picking the right person for the right role. Like you said, Kennedy, he's good with suing corporations for just poisoning people, suing corporations for poisoning the environment. Now, with the especially when it comes to vaccines, now I think the Democrats will use that in the coming months and years to try to weaken the conservatives by getting them to fight among each other. Now, this is, of course, a very hot button topic, right? Not just because of the pandemic, but also with just regular vaccines. And then, of course, biosecurity, countering future threats. Now we have a fancy new vaccine technology that even security experts, that long-sitting security experts say, yeah, this is kind of what we wanted for a long time. General concept, this is what we had in mind because it's quicker. So there's a lot of threats on the horizon, and we need to get our information straight, and we need to prevent this infighting, because we saw this already, right? With Trump, when Trump wanted to keep or the Trump administration wanted to keep the stores open. They wanted to keep the economy going. At the same time, they were pushing Operation Warp Speed, get the vaccine ready quick so people can get vaccinated, so the stores can remain open, people can go about their lives. So this was kind of the strategy. But then you saw people just viciously attacking Trump for even just in general for developing a COVID vaccine. So this is why we need to get our information straight and prevent this infighting, because it's so easy for misguided people or just democratic operatives, covert democratic operatives, or Chinese operatives or Russian operatives to get us to infight about these topics.
Well, there's another element here, and it's the Scylla and Charybdis of this whole issue, which is, some of my conservative friends and people who really understand communism, they took the hard line that this whole pandemic was a scam, and that you shouldn't treat it seriously at all. I never took that position, and they also took a hard position against the vaccine. And of course, my position against the vaccines that were given, my position has always been, you got to be careful. And I wanted to understand the science. And I think what you understand is that it takes about 8 years to develop a vaccine safely, maybe 8 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And of course, they were coming up with something in a matter of months, in about a year. And this clearly was not according to any kind of safety protocols. I mean, by anybody's common sense. And of course, it doesn't mean that the vaccines would necessarily not work or not be safe, but it raises a question about their safety, right? So this is where this controversy bubbled up. But I think that the problem is that what if we're under attack by a foreign power with a virus? Developing a vaccine against an attack is a defensive measure, and it's a legitimate defensive measure.
Yeah.
It's like, do we distrust the government so much that we won't allow it to defend us?
Yeah. I was trying when the pandemic hit during the Trump era. When the pandemic hit, I told my audience I'm going to be as responsible with this as I can. Luckily, out of sheer coincidence, weeks before the pandemic, publicly was known and was a thing. Weeks before, I released a book on biological warfare, biosecurity. Who built this thing, the threats that are appearing on the horizon, the future threats. So this was pure coincidence. I was already very much into this whole field. I had worked on this for months, and then the pandemic hit. So I told people, you have to make a choice, ultimately. Will you try your luck with a vaccine that was developed was developed under the Trump administration, that was greenlit by many Republicans, especially those who are working or very conservative people in the military, the intelligence community, the whole biosecurity apparatus. This was all part of biosecurity. This was pushed by this broad base of conservatives. Are you willing to, will you try your luck with that? Or will you try your luck with this weirdo bat virus that was potentially modified in a Chinese lab? And there's more than one lab theory. Now, this is always something that I found weird about Fauci when he was dismissing, and at first outright dismissing any real lab scenario, even though you couldn't exclude this. Any security professional would not exclude this from the get-go. And also, there were multiple lab scenarios where sometimes, well, as we now know by now, they will find a virus in nature, they will modify it in the lab, so it's more dangerous to humans, and then they study that new thing that they've created, and maybe share the data, maybe share only part of the data, but by doing so, gain of function research, you've already created a biological weapon. That's just what it is. So, so this was handled. This was handled to a large degree by conservatives, and we need to prevent this infighting about vaccines in general, prevent infighting about the traditional conspiracy stuff that was floating around, even during the election cycle, especially. Now, I understand this conspiracy stuff has become really popular over the last, or more popular over the last years. But it's also divisive. It got some votes. It got some extra votes. But the Democrats will use that, and some other weirdo operatives will use that to create more tension among conservatives to weaken them. So, sure. There's a Jewish casino guy that donated money to Donald Trump. So what? That's not a problem here. That's not an issue. But some people will make this a problem. Some people will. Now, we saw people even in the conservative sphere, I think even Alex Jones, Infowars, and some of these guys, they started before the election. They started to complain about Project 2025, and I looked at Project 2025, and we know the Heritage Foundation has existed for a long time. We know the Heritage Foundation, but people started to loudly complain about 2025. So Trump even had to publicly distance himself from it and say, I don't want to read it. I have nothing to do with it. Just prevent this infighting when it makes no sense, when it's not for our benefit. Because I think this is one of the main strategies now of the left, because what they tried previously didn't work.
Yeah, it's divide and conquer. Yeah, in politics, in electoral politics, it's all about making as big a tent as possible, including as many people in your political movement, that you can win a majority and you can govern and you can have people. There's something about, in the nature of countries and national psychology, what the majority feeling produces. And this is one of the things, this election victory of Trump. Look, it's very fascinating. Kamala Harris got 60 million votes. In 2020, Biden got 81 votes.
Yeah.
He's not a more dynamic character than she is, right? I mean, he's all shriveled up and old, and he's walking around, like just barely able to move. He falls down all the time. I mean, he really is a pathetic sort of figure to elect as president. And he got 81 million votes. He got more votes than Hillary Clinton. He got 15 million more votes than Hillary Clinton in 2016, who was a very seasoned politician. Her husband had been president. She had this Democratic machine behind her. She had incumbency. She had Obama behind her, President Obama. And yet this Biden character, no, it was the pandemic and the way they had these loosey-goosey ballots that they could ballot stuff. And even this time, where it was less prevalent in this election, there were stories, I haven't confirmed them, about ballots being intercepted on their way to Philadelphia. But there was a lot of vigilance, where I understand there's stories all around the country about ballot stuffing being forestalled. And now we see Trump had the popular vote in this election. And it makes me wonder, in California, there's massive corruption in the electoral machinery in California. She won by 25% of the vote. Am I remembering that right? I mean, no, or is it 17%? Anyway, it was a large number. It was a double-digit number she won by. How much of that was just overspill from corruption? And by the way, Republicans want to stay home, because you look at the ballot, there's no Republicans to vote for in California. The last time I voted in California, it's like, there's no Republicans on this ballot.
And just
they don't even bother to run.
With the Republicans, I mean, people have a very distinctive idea what they're gonna get, because despite all this nonsense about Trump will start a dictatorship, he's gonna make the decision to start a dictatorship and blah blah blah. No, it's gonna be a Republican administration. We've seen a lot of Republican
the
administration.
Dictatorship is a projection of the guilty lefties in the Democratic Party.
People kind of, people either remember Reagan, people remember this, or they looked up Reagan, Nixon, and stuff like that, and they said, yeah, well, this was reliable. Forget the little scandal, the little stuff with Nixon back then. That's not a big deal, right? So people know what to expect. People know what they're getting. But the Democrats have revealed this insane Marxism, and it's been more open in the last couple of years. They thought they had the youth. Now they're losing it. They thought they had the youth, and they were pushing the super hard Marxism, and people thought, and many voters thought, well, with the Republicans, I know what I'm getting, but with these Democrats nowadays, this is insanity. We're just gonna, go into the unknown and go into this wild circus, right? That's what hurt them. That's what really hurt them.
Yeah, well, not being able, I suspect, it was I first kind of got introduced to this idea of Democrats generating votes that weren't real in elections when I read Jay Adams's book on the voting rights division of the Justice Department. And it was, I try to survey different subjects and I read different books. And Jay Adams's book, it came out in 2012, and then it was an online book, and it was updated. There's hard copies of it too, paperback. And Jay Adams was a guy who worked in there. He saw the leftists coming in, and he saw that they were, like, for example, years ago, the state of Florida, this was before 2012, wanted to clean up its voter rolls. Now, this is something that Governor DeSantis had done in his first term. He just squeaked in his first term. He cleaned up the voter rolls as governor, and then he wins this landslide the next time. Why? Because he cleaned up the voter rolls. It was the dirty voter rolls that was making Florida into a purple state. Cleaned up the voter rolls, and Florida's a solid red state. Isn't that interesting? And what Jay Adams says, he said, the Justice Department sued the state of Florida when it went to clean up the voter rolls. And they cried racism, foul. You can't clean up these voter rolls because you'll disenfranchise minority voters. That's what they were saying. When really what they were doing is, Jay Adams's analysis was that in every election you had, I think it was 1 million dead people and 3 million illegal aliens voting in every election nationally for the Democrats. And so they were getting an extra 4 million votes, and this is in 2012, in every election. Of course, that being true, and he wrote the book just before the Obama won against the Utah senator that everybody hates now. What's that?
Romney,
yeah. Obama won against Romney, but it was so close. The polls before that election said Romney was going to win. And Obama on that day said, oh, don't worry, don't panic, we're going to win. He won. Now, did he know about this extra 4 million votes that put it, because it was the Republican margin was pretty, Romney was going to win by a % or two.
Yeah.
And 4 million votes in an election where you were having, 115, 120 million votes cast, 4 million votes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's 3%.
Oh, and in case people don't know this or have never, been taught this in school, maybe, there have been significant phases in American history where a single party was dominating for quite a while. It wasn't always this 50-50 thing, this very super close, scenario. So this is not unusual. If we're going to see,
we can go over that. The Democrats dominated the U.S. government before the Civil War, from 1800, and after that, the collapse of the Federalist Party and the advent of the Whig Party. The Democrats dominated. You'll notice most presidents between 1800 and 1860 are Democrats, not Whigs. But then after 1860, with the advent of the breakup of the Union and the Civil War, and it's being put together again, you'll find most Republicans are I mean, most presidents are
President, yeah.
Republicans after that. You had Grover Cleveland was the only Democrat elected after the Civil War and before the election of Woodrow Wilson in 1912. And Wilson only won election in 1912 because the Republican Party split. Teddy Roosevelt went against Taft, who was sort of his handpicked successor, and Teddy Roosevelt formed the Bull Moose Party. And that's how Woodrow Wilson, who was the first Southerner to be elected to the presidency after the American Civil War, by the way, because I think he was born in South Carolina, if I'm remembering correctly. So Woodrow Wilson was that first Democrat. Of course, then after Woodrow Wilson's 2 terms, you get a succession of Republican presidents: Warren Harding,
Yeah.
Calvin Coolidge, and Hoover. And then, of course, the Great Depression breaks the back of the Republican Party because Hoover gets blamed, and you have Roosevelt elected in 4 successive elections.
Yeah, and also while we're at the topic of the evil, super dictatorship, looming or whatever, was kind of the theme in and of itself. In the Democratic, for the Democrats during the election campaign. Now, of course, there is concern. And it has been around for decades. There's concern that there's going to be systematic, actual, communist uprisings, as have existed for a long time on various continents, in various countries. We've done shows about this. I talked about this almost communist revolution in Germany in 1923. It was already announced, in communist papers, and the Soviets were talking about it. Yeah, it's going to happen. It's on. But then it had to be sort of postponed, and they ran into a bunch of trouble. So there are specific concerns about mass uprisings in America in the near future, especially if the situation with China and Russia intensifies. People may go crazy over some baseline security measures or some baseline American involvement internationally. So there's always a chance of a uprising, which is not spontaneous, which is always organized by some shady operatives. And also, in connection with the general uprising problem, there's a danger of mass migrant uprisings or illegal migrants uprising, because at some point they might think, if we overwhelm security forces, if we overwhelm the state, the government, some of these illegals might think they can get away with that and they can get something out of it. So of course there's a real danger. Of course there's stuff happening in the background. But I think everybody should, especially if people are kind of undecided, do they lean towards Democrat or Republican? I think people need to understand. And these matters are complicated, and it's just something that you need to look at very carefully. Don't jump to conclusions, and don't make any rash decisions like becoming a leftist or rapidly changing the people you associate with and you hang out with. This is something you need to look at very closely. And now, when you look at this administration that is forming right now, if you look at some of these people that may be fulfilling certain roles in this Trump administration, there's some names that have been around for a while, and there's some new names or some names that are not as famous yet, but they've been around for a while. I mean, now we've heard about Susie Wiles, who's going to be the new White House chief of staff. So most people have never heard of Susie Wiles. And she joined the Trump campaign after working as a top advisor to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. She's credited with playing a key role in helping deliver Trump the White House for a second time. And Wiles's father was an NFL player, very successful sportscaster. And in 1979, Wiles was hired as an assistant for Representative Jack Kemp. And on and on and on. In 1980, Wiles joined Ronald Reagan's 1980 presidential campaign as a campaign scheduler. So these people have been around. They've been around for a while, and so very many names that are familiar. Then we got some other names that are being tossed around. Florida Senator Marco Rubio may play a part in the Trump administration. Mike Pompeo, former CIA director, Secretary of State in Trump's first administration. Richard Grenell, Trump's former ambassador to Germany, who was like the coolest guy ever. I mean, Grenell was saying things out loud that needed to be said a long time ago, and when he said that, it freaked out the left, the left government here.
Now, was Grenell gay?
Yes.
Yes, I do remember that. So what was it that he said that freaked people out?
Just some absolute baseline things. He said that
pro-freedom stuff.
Things have been going wrong for a long time in Europe. He even said that he would like to see things to become more conservative, and things of that nature. I mean, he was giving some solid, fair criticism towards these governments, towards our government, the Social Democrats. And they were so bad, actually, our Social Democrats. They were completely pro-Russia, or very much pro-Russia, for a long time. They were really into the Nord Stream pipelines. They were really into appeasement towards the Putin regime. It was getting so bad that anybody who knows anything about security, anybody who knows the stuff, would have said something much, much harsher if you're not, as long as you're not in a diplomatic role. So what Grenell said was measured, it was fair, but it created an insane outrage, complete outrage. And he served as acting director of national intelligence under Trump in 2020. He was a United States ambassador to Germany from 2018 to 2020. Grenell was a U.S. State Department spokesperson to the United Nations during the George W. Bush administration, and here. In March, listen to that. In March of 2019, Wolfgang Kubicki, vice president of the German parliament and deputy chairman of the so-called Libertarian Party, charged Grenell with acting, quote, like a high commissioner of an occupying power, and called for Grenell to be expelled from Germany. Wow, that's something, right? I mean, it's not like he was it's not like Grenell was acting like John J. McCloy, and John J. McCloy back in the old days as High Commissioner, he did what had to be done.
It's very interesting you mentioned Grenell, because you know who really wanted his job?
Who?
Colonel Douglas McGregor.
Really?
He made a huge pitch for the job to Trump. He wanted that job. There were articles written about it at the time, which were rather curious, kind of trying to explore what it was that was behind the mind of Colonel Douglas McGregor. You know, what kind of a person was he? And he does seem to be a bit of a Germanophile. But so you hadn't heard about this, huh? He didn't. Trump did not appoint him.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, he did not. I don't remember who he appointed. Who did he appoint instead?
Instead of for what position you mean?
Ambassador. You
mean ambassador for Germany?
Yeah.
Well, Grenell did that from at least it was 2018 to 2020.
Right, and I think it was 2020 that Colonel McGregor was trying to get the office, because I think Grenell stepped down in 2020, right?
Yeah, exactly. I remember something. I remember something about that, but it's eluding me now how the story continued. But Grenell was doing a real good job. Grenell was delivering the position about the Nord Stream pipelines, and that position had a broad base with the Republican Party, and they said, we will sanction everybody and everything that is connected to this Russian Nord Stream pipeline. So if you insure this thing, you will get hit by all kinds of sanctions. If you underwrite it, if you construct it, if you do this, that, and the other, you will be hit some of the most significant economic sanctions you can imagine. And guess what? Guess what the German left did? Our government, what our government, which is now broken, right on the election day when Trump or the Republican Party won, what our government then did was they created an eco. What was the form of this organization? They created sort of an eco organization, sort of an eco trust, which was a front to evade possible incoming American sanctions against that pipeline. And they lost. They sort of lost their fight.
This is back in 2020, right?
Yeah, this is around that time. This is when the threat was becoming serious. The economic sanctions threat against the pipeline was becoming serious, and so they created this.
Do you know why Grinnell stepped down? Is it related to that?
I don't remember. I don't exactly remember that.
I believe nobody was appointed to replace Grinnell. I think that the charge d'affaires is still the ambassador. You can look that up and see. I don't remember his name. It's like Meltzer or something like that.
But they really got.
But I think I don't know.
They really try to evade American sanctions, which is like, I mean, it's America's right to say, if you go ahead with this pipeline, if these entities go ahead with this pipeline, we will, as America, cut you off from us, from America, for doing that. It's not like an occupying power as this German politician or this minister said. This is just a natural reaction. So it's not like only some people think that only Joe Biden was against the pipipeline and Biden said we will end the pipeline.
It was sort of pro forma for it was the Nixon administration. I think back in 1971 when this pipeline was first discussed. And of course, we know who the Chancellor of Germany was back then. The Nixon administration warned the Germans, don't do this pipeline, don't make deals with the Russians, because then it was just an idea that somebody had. And every administration after that warned the Germans again and again, don't do this, the Russians will use it to manipulate you. And of course, that they invaded Ukraine, and then, bam, they cut the oil off. And then it was blown up, right? It was blown up. Am I remembering this right? The pipeline was blown up after the oil was shut off by the Russians.
Well, they had this idea that the Russians wanted to extort us. They wanted to blackmail us, and
of course they didn't they though?
Yeah, and when these when this pipeline was blown up eventually, at the most shallow point of the ocean, by the way. So it didn't require U.S. special forces and 10 other forces and all this grand scheming. It was fairly reasonably easy to pull that off. But when it got blown up, the Russians tried to blindside us, the Germans. They had this cloak and dagger plan to quickly withdraw all what's left of these Russian holdings in Germany, just to drain everything, make all the money, all the contracts, make everything disappear, so we get blindsided right during the winter. So we will be left standing without any gas reserves for the winter, which are necessary especially for the industry, plus heating people's homes, but especially important for the industry.
It was devastating. What they did was devastating.
Well, it was caught because there were defectors. This was in the German mainstream press. There were two defectors and warned us, or probably warned the Americans, and the Americans warned us. Well, you're going to get blindsided. Watch out.
Yeah. Well, and of course, look at the role the Green Party played in this in Germany.
Oh God.
Look at the role the Green Party helped set this up, because if Germany had nuclear power, had other means of power, this blackmail scheme wouldn't even be workable.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, the Greens, I mean, in the 80s, the Green Party here was so pro-Moscow. When they visited Russia, or the Soviet Russia at the time, they wouldn't even give a press conference in the hotel lobby where they were staying, these green German politicians. They were choosing another venue that was distinctively tied to the Russian state. They even shut up after the Chernobyl disaster, the nuclear disaster.
Oh, did they? I didn't know that.
Yes, they did.
They shut up after it.
They were really quiet. They were really quiet when that happened for quite a while, because it didn't fit their script. That
is really interesting.
Yeah, and then we got the Stasi files, and we know about some people who were confirmed spies in the Green Party. Now, over the last maybe 10 years, the Green Party pretended to have cleaned up their act. They at least pretended to be more pro-West, pro-America. But a couple of weeks ago, maybe I've mentioned this on the show, a couple of weeks ago, the leaders of the youth sector of the party, because that's pretty common here. You have the regular party and you have the party youth as an organization.
I wonder where they borrowed that idea from.
Yeah. So, but then the youth, the leadership of the Green Party, the leadership of the Green Party youth, they just resigned. They just said, "We're done. This party is moving towards the West. This party is now too much pro-America. We're gonna leave the party." Just get out of the party and start something really left-wing, hardcore left-wing next. This has just happened a few weeks ago. So I don't trust the Green Party to this very day, even though they got some people in there. They're in the what they call the Atlantic Bridge. That's kind of an organization that's been around for a while, pro-America network. But I still don't trust that party. And now, as we're moving towards a potential World War situation, now we have the Republicans in control, and also we're going to see a victory in a few months. We're going to see a victory in Germany of the Conservative Party, which has been pro-America for a long time, and this party has actually been created by the Americans after the war, right? So people can, what was this so-called libertarian guy complaining about Grinnell, saying Grinnell is acting like a high commissioner of an occupying force? It was John J. McCloy, who used to be our high commissioner.
Who was the high commissioner?
Who was the high commissioner? Yeah, and he was like this multi-talent genius who was also playing a big part in scaling up America's military.
By the way, he read a great deal.
Oh yeah, he read 5 books on everything.
Reader. Yeah.
He read 5 books on every topic he was interested in, because he wanted to get 5 different perspectives. And he learned that at school. He was taught, run with the fastest people you can find. Maybe you're not going to end up the fastest person, but you're going to be pretty darn fast. So run with the fastest people. And he was so smart. When he died, this was almost like the burial was almost like a head of state burial. There was so many powerful people that went to the funeral, and most people had never even really heard of, or they couldn't even remember John J. McCloy when he died, because he was so silent after his phase as high commissioner, right?
He wasn't a guy in the limelight.
No, not at all. And it's like what you can't fault Grinnell for this for what he said. And now we're gonna see the Conservative Party win here in a few months, and things are looking better now.
This is really good news, though, isn't it? The left coalition collapsing in Germany. This is the thing that makes me a little peeved. Why do they have to wait till March before they call the election? Why do they get to hang out and be in power all this time?
Yeah, it's part of it is bureaucracy. It's kind of these complicated rules, and another part is there's this extreme right-wing party, very extreme right-wing party, the AfD. Now, the AfD takes its ideology from hardcore revisionism and conspiracy books, or traditional conspiracy ideology, and the AfD is extremely pro-Russia, and they're more and more pro-China. Now, the current leader, or one of the leaders of the party right now, is a woman. And she spent years in China. She was in her business career. She spent years in China.
That is so curious for the most right-wing party in Germany, or the
absolutely.
largest.
And
what are they? 20 to 25% of the vote?
No. They dropped. They were about slightly above 20 at some point a few months ago, maybe a year ago. Now they dropped to like 18. They're around 18 now, something like that.
So
here's the kicker.
Then the Christian Democratic Union is picking up the difference.
Well, here's the surprise factor. Now, this AfD party, may be completely illegal. Now, we only had. I mean, there's only.
What do you mean completely illegal? Oh, because of their revisionism?
Well, there's two things. There's in the post-war Germany. In post-war Germany, there were two cases. Significant cases of political parties getting banned after 1945. Now, one party that was banned was the Communist Party of Germany, the official Communist Party of West Germany, of West Germany, right? So that party was, and I recently checked the ruling back then for making this party, declaring this party illegal, and. It was the whole argument of the court, the constitutional court, the whole argument was resting on two pillars. One, this party was following a traditional Marxist, Leninist strategy to take power and establish a dictatorship and use whatever means necessary. That was one pillar. The other pillar was that this party was basically remote controlled by Moscow. So it was an attack it was an infiltration by a hostile foreign power. And so the rules say you can't do one or the other, and you can't do both. Now, same thing. Good
call, by the way, by the German Constitutional Court.
Yes, and now with the AfD, now people can possibly imagine that a party is illegal when it's so right wing that it wants to create a fascist dictatorship of some sort. Now,
is that really true about the AfD? Do they really want a fascist dictatorship, or is it just a minority within the party? Or how do you read that?
The material that's already in public and the material that has been leaked, to me, strongly suggests that this party is illegal. Now, in court. And this has to do with the upcoming elections. So I think they're stretching it out a bit, or it's going to wait a bit, because it is planned to announce soon an official investigation, opening up an official case. And at the end of the case, there's a ruling of the Constitutional Court. Is this party illegal or is it not illegal? So when they announce it before the election,
way, if you have till March to call the election, you get all that time to make that party illegal, because you can go through the court process.
You can at least get the ball rolling and start the process. And when that process is started before the election, likely the AfD will lose significant points. Now, the whole case will rest ultimately on the material that has been collected by our domestic intelligence services, but also foreign services, because people probably don't know this, or they don't realize this. If you as a German party, if you as a German party, if you go against American interests so hard, America can legally spy on you. That's just the reality, and there's a reason for that.
Under German law.
Yes and no. I mean, pretty much everybody knows we get all our major intelligence from America, basically. So every time a terrorist attack, an Islamist terror attack gets prevented, or this or that gets prevented, recently, almost an airliner went down. This almost happened. A full-blown airliner would have fallen out of the sky because of some Russian asset wanted to place a bomb on the plane. But every time something gets prevented, it comes out in the press that the actionable intelligence came from a foreign, mainly American intelligence agency. So the Americans, they look what's going on. They see what's going on in Europe, and by American law, if in a foreign country some political party is completely trying to undermine American interests, hard, America can legally spy on them. That's just the reality. And so the case rests on the intelligence that has been gathered. And if the information says, yes, this party is crazy, they have crazy plans, then this party will be declared illegal, which will be a major blow to the Russians and the Chinese. So, yeah, watch out for that.
Yeah, because this is interesting to me that we know the Russians have some connections to the AfD, and you say the Chinese as well.
Yeah,
that's really concerning. And of course, we know how this scissors strategy works. We've seen it in Europe. We're seeing it in America. They're trying it in America. Not sure it's going to work here. We'll have to wait and see. So all this thing playing out in Germany seems to me very important. And do you think it's possible that Germany will, given who Merkel was and what happened to the Christian Democratic Union, is it possible the right can right itself, so to speak?
Yeah.
That you can get a decent right wing in Germany that can actually govern the country and not be under the influence of a communist bloc country?
Sure. I mean, it's like now it's fairly obvious to anybody how close Russia and China and North Korea are. I mean, we're having North Korean soldiers in Ukraine. At least 10,000 in Europe. Communist Asian troops in Europe on our doorstep.
And the numbers could increase at any time.
Exactly. So now it's like this whole multi-decade idea of let's wait and see, let's not escalate things, keep it cool, calm everybody down. This whole idea is out of the window. And now it's about how much...
Do you think the German, given how screwed up the German-speaking world is in its understandings and how rife with disinformation the German language is even affected by the disinformation and the ideology, is it possible that the Christian Democratic Union can break free of its many shackles and actually move in the right direction?
It's very possible. I mean, there have always been organizations behind the party or attached to the party. There's a lot of networks with the Americans that have been around for decades.
And are there good people in the German military and in the German police and intelligence services that might be from behind the scenes ready to guide this process?
Yeah, I mean, sure. There's still enough reasonable people around. I think the only part that has been missing was, besides the now obvious threat from the Eastern Bloc, the one piece that has been missing is a stronger economic bond between the United States and Germany. And we've seen some progress in that. There's been, I don't exactly remember how far the project is, but there was supposed to be a Tesla Elon Musk gigafactory that was planned or is currently being built in Germany of some sort. Then the TSMC chip manufacturer, I think they've moved production from Taiwan to Germany of some sort. I haven't been following this in detail, but there's some significant economic collaboration now happening on German soil. And once that void is filled, once the Conservative Party, the pro-American guys, once these conservatives in Germany, once they can convince the people, stick with us, stick with this plan, there's going to be production, there's going to be jobs, we know how this works, we are reliable, and then it's a win. Then the Conservative Party here, they can maybe achieve what they had achieved in the past, a few decades earlier. They can go up to 50% or even slightly above 50%.
I want to underscore to the listeners, anyone new that's joined us, is Alex is in Bavaria. He's German and he's in Germany. And so really, this terrain really well. Is the liquefied natural gas from America coming by ship? Is that somehow connected with what Musk is doing? Are there plans to enlarge that so that Germany will be independent of all Russian sources of energy?
Well,
Is this
what's
a way to cut Russia out? With Trump in now,
sure,
this seems like
sure.
what Trump would naturally do to
There's
bind Germany.
there's a few options here. One is build more terminals for these liquefied gas
Yes, more
deliveries.
terminals.
So you need the
Yeah.
terminals. Now, obviously, the old government here, which is now broken, which just collapsed the day that Trump won. The old government, they try to prevent more of these, or a significant number of these terminals. And the other thing is something that I figured out maybe 2 years ago, 3 years
Why
ago.
would they damage their own country's hopes of receiving
Well,
natural gas from
um,
America?
well, I mean the former German chancellor, the guy before Angela Merkel, Mr. Gerhard Schröder, who was very
Oh
close to
yeah, he
Putin,
works for Russian gas.
very
Yeah.
close to Putin, started to work for the Russians right after his chancellorship, and he was a big fan of the Nord Stream pipelines. Now that guy,
Doesn't he work for Gazprom?
yeah,
Or
he worked
they
for
pay
the.
him, I think.
It
Yeah.
was yes, it was either Gazprom or Rosneft, one of these companies, and
Yeah.
and or attached to it. So and basically, this guy, when this former chancellor, when the Ukraine war, or a couple of months into the Ukraine war, he was interviewed by the New York Times, I believe it was, and the Times reporters, they were much too polite. They were much too nice to him, but they did asking about, did your strategy of appeasement fail? And his answer was, well, I only did with what my predecessors did, and also there was some kind of a big deal that was cut. When the Soviet Union supposedly went under. He talked about this
Was that
deal.
under Willy Brandt? Was that Brandt's doing?
Well, no, he said he was doing the same thing as these previous chancellors, like Brandt and all the others. So he was following in their footsteps,
So
and he,
all of them had been toying with
yeah,
this
yeah,
Ostpolitik kind
all
of.
of them were super soft, had their own back channels to Moscow, which are possibly illegal, like Egon Bahr, who was recently mentioned by Vladimir Putin, by the way, in the Tucker Carlson interview. Nobody remember. I mean, internationally, nobody knew who Egon Bahr was. Why is Putin talking about Egon Bahr? I know why he's mentioning him. So, it's like when you have these, and Schröder, he was saying something like, well, we had to do this appeasement because that was the deal at the time. It was the best deal we could get, blah, blah, blah. But he was just coming up with the most lame excuses. And also, during his chancellorship, and then Angela Merkel, they prevented the drilling of our domestic gas. We actually have a lot more gas than was previously known, because I checked all the studies. And these experts actually say we're probably sitting on a significant amount of gas,
Well,
and
yeah,
it
Germany
would be
has
nice.
has coal under
Yeah,
it, so
and
it would
it
make
would be
sense that
nice.
there would be natural
Yeah,
gas under there
and now
somewhere.
and
Yeah,
and
sure.
these experts were saying that the Americans are so far ahead in drilling technology. Now, some of it is called fracking, but not all of it. And there's different types of fracking, and you can, and a study has proven this now conclusively over here. You can do fracking without really harming the environment. And when that study came out, there was a government study here in Germany. When that came out, it nullified the ban on fracking. It's no longer illegal, actually, to frack the domestic gas. But we kind of sort of need some American help, because they know all about fracking, and if they come over here,
We've got the technology
if
that
if
makes
they
it.
if the Americans come over here and they teach us, or they drill for us, or they teach us how to drill for this gas, our problem is solved. We don't need Moscow anymore. We don't need the Russians anymore. Not at all. Not at all.
That's fascinating, Alex. We've done an hour now, and that's been fascinating about Germany, about what's going on. It's exciting. The American election, the Russians are behaving like they've suffered a kind of blow. There's a kind of retreat psychology diplomatically. Instead of us appeasing them, they are acting like they're going to appease us. Very interesting. There could be more military moves. But it's funny to watch this dance. And so this thing in Germany is fascinating because I think we're going to see in other countries a dynamic that could be like this. And of course, the Russians and Chinese, their agent networks, their friends, are going to try to counteract this. And I think that's part of what we're going to see. And we're not going to see everything because a lot of it's hidden behind the surface. So I want to thank the audience for joining us in this discussion about the aftermath of the Trump victory and its implications for Europe, especially. And I'm Jeff Nyquist. My co host has been Alex Benesch. This has been Friends and Enemies, and we thank you for joining us.